Albert Einstein and other scientists designed a way to make a ship vanish into thin air, literally, and reappear somewhere else. What actually happened to the USS Eldridge in the fall of 1943?
Believers in the Philadelphia experiment say there are plans to give the destroyer escort the supreme advantage over submarines: invisibility. The alleged brainchild of none other than Albert Einstein. Einstein, in fact, worked for the Navy at the time. Officially, he is working on ideas for conventional weapons, including torpedoes and underwater mines. But this is a cover for Einstein's real project, at least so say believers. Among them, a supposed eyewitness to the experiment named Carlos Allende.
According to Allende, the Navy used a variation of Albert Einstein's unified field theory, which at that point in time was supposedly uncompleted. And they used this unified field theory to bend light, to render the ship invisible because it was encased in this electromagnetic fog.
In July 1943 in Philadelphia Naval Yard, the experiment is said to go forward. Powerful electromagnetic fields are engaged around the Eldridge, a skeleton crew aboard. Scientists and officers watching at a safe distance. Carlos Allende, a deckhand on a nearby Liberty ship.
He saw was a ship that was engulfed in a greenish, almost a St. Elmo's fire, a green fiery fog.
As the electromagnetic fog swallows the Eldridge, strange optical effects manifest themselves.
And that as he watched and was able to even insert his arm into what he called the terrific flow of this energy, the ship disappeared.
To the amazement of all the onlookers, they not only had radar invisibility, they had optical invisibility.
The Eldridge reportedly achieves the supreme form of camouflage, invisibility. But then comes an even stranger effect, teleportation. That as the Eldridge starts to reappear, there is a sudden flash of light. That the ship vanishes from sight once again, and simultaneously begins to reappear in the Naval Yard in Norfolk, Virginia, 300 miles away. After a few minutes, she dematerializes in Norfolk and reappears in the midst of another ozone-laden green fog in Philadelphia. Throughout this miraculous journey, the USS Eldridge emerges unscathed. But for her crew, it is a different story.
Men were molecularly attached to the ship, bonded with the ship as it was teleported. Men were driven insane, men caught fire, men went invisible. I mean, it was terrible, horrific things that happened to these crew members.
The USS Eldridge returns after being teleported hundreds of miles. As she rematerializes out of a thick green fog, observers are electrified by the achievement, but their excitement turns to horror. Molecules have been scrambled, human with metal. Limbs have been fused to bulkheads. A gruesome sight.
First thing they found was 2 sailors buried in the steel deck. The bodies were literally buried in the steel, dying or near dead. 2 more were found standing upright in a bulkhead, also buried in the steel. 5th man with his hand buried in the steel up to his wrist.
Other sailors are simply missing, vaporized into thin air. For survivors, there are still other problems due to the powerful electromagnetic fields they have been exposed to.
Men were driven insane, men caught fire, men went invisible. I mean, it was terrible, horrific things that happened to these crew members.
The problem basically was that the human nervous system could not take exposure to that level of magnetic and electric fields, and it would cause neural damage.
Nerve damage so severe that some of the victims are reportedly institutionalized, while falsely classified as missing in action.
Their family was never told the truth. They were told basically that they were lost at sea during the war as part of the war effort.
In one version of the story, the men are susceptible to something called freezing, which is fading in and out of invisibility. This leads to the most surreal episode of the story. In a waterfront tavern, a group of sailors from the Eldridge are drinking. One thing leads to another, and a fight breaks out. It is a garden variety bar brawl with one difference. The sailors are fading in and out of sight.
The sailors involved in the fracas became invisible, dissipated the thin air in front of frightened patrons and waitresses, and they were there one minute and gone the next.
Faced with these bizarre after effects and the carnage aboard the Eldridge, the Navy, it is said, deep sixes the whole operation. The scientific team is dissolved, further experiments canceled. The Eldridge's logs are said to be altered to show that she was never in Philadelphia Naval Yard. Witnesses are forced to sign draconian oaths of secrecy. And so closes the Navy's World War II experiment in invisibility and teleportation.